siphon votes away from the Democratic candidate. That is not necessarily illegal unless that sham candidate is paid, which is what the lobbyist told us when we interviewed him about it. He said he does not recall the conversation, but that just talking about it would not be illegal. That said, the FBI is very interested in that conversation because, of course, again, they're broadening the lens, they're looking at everything, and if they feel that there's reason to continue to investigate election fraud, they will proceed.
On MyHeritage, you can build your family tree and make amazing discoveries about your family history really easily. Let me show you how. First, go to myheritage.com. Sign up and enter a few names. You, your parents, and your grandparents. Whatever information that you have. Pretty simple, right? That's my great-grandma. MyHeritage found her name in another family tree, which added 50 relatives to mine in one click. So you can grow your family tree and make new discoveries instantly. Nice. MyHeritage has billions of historical records that reveal new details about your ancestors. You can search the records yourself or sit back and watch the discoveries roll in. Here's a newspaper article about my grandfather. Nobody ever mentioned this before. I can't wait to tell my family. I also discovered this photo of my grandfather's parents. Now I finally know what...
Mark, can we talk about Mr. Purse?
Going to the gym later?
Berzolo, who's the hand surgeon, marijuana entrepreneur, sits on the board, I believe, at the Orlando airport, connected to... You're laughing because it's like the most incredible Florida bio of all time. That is him there greeting... Yeah, that's him greeting Donald Trump with the governor, Ron DeSantis, when he came. And he's the one who, again, there is reporting indicating investigations of trips to the Bahamas and the possibility of payment for sex on those trips, and Matt Gaetz going along. But, you know, this seems like a pretty connected guy more broadly in Florida Republican circles if he's showing up at the airport when the president comes to town.
Sure. He, in fact, Matt Gaetz at one point was saying maybe he'd make a good Surgeon General for Florida. The doctor loved coming to Tallahassee. There's a kind of a ceremonial thing that they have during session, which is kind of doctor of the day. Normally, you know, you're a lawmaker, you have a doctor to your district, they come up for a day. He's done it like 27 times, 24 times. So he's been very kind of active in coming to Tallahassee, very interested in the medical marijuana legislation that Gaetz, when he was a state legislator, has helped pass. He's just kind of one of the cast of characters who was on that Bahamas trip you mentioned. Probably about 3 planes that we're talking total. There was him, his girlfriend, these other women, which some people escorts, including the once 17-year-old at the heart of the sex with a minor case, who then had turned 15. There was also a now former state Division of Business and Professional Regulation, a chief who also flew his private plane there, and then there was Matt Gaetz, who flew commercial. So they all kind of gathered there in the Bahamas for quite a time. The question is whether that time was illegal or not. There are going to be interesting aspects of the case in that it is illegal to pay someone to have sex or go across state lines. The question is, since some of these women had long-standing relationships with these men, were they actually being paid directly for sex, or was it a seeking arrangement sort of deal?
Yeah.
So fucking nasty, man.
That's right, and Matt Gaetz somewhat famously said early in this that there was an effort to paint his generosity towards ex-girlfriends as something more untoward. And Katie, let me ask you one final question about the Department of Justice in this. Obviously, this is a politically sensitive case. We know it was greenlit under Bill Barr, the last administration. Where is this being run out of? And I imagine if you're the Attorney General or anyone else, right, you want to make sure this is all very by the book and very segmented from any possible politics or political interest.
Absolutely. So to your point, Attorney General Barr, he did have to greenlight this last year. He sent out a memo to all federal prosecutors saying if you're looking into any members of Congress, people running for office, up to the presidential race, he needed to basically sign off. All supervisors would need to be apprised, and then the Deputy Attorney General and the Attorney General. So that was the process. The investigation itself is being run out of the Middle District of Florida. It is actually not Gaetz's district, that would be the Northern District, but it's where the Greenberg investigation began. So it's still being run by that office.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.
I've always loved sci-fi and the idea of being right on the edge of discovery and on the front.
Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz faces a new potential legal earthquake, and it's happening today. We've been tracking it. An associate that is tied to his legal investigations likely to plead guilty. The Trump loyalist facing a new sex allegation, and this one is about a Bahamas trip. This is in addition to those separate allegations that have been reported that range from paying for sex to sex trafficking to sex with an underage girl. Now, it's important to note, Gaetz denies all of that. And at this point, the DOJ is investigating but has not charged him with any crime. Now, why is today a major turning point? I'll show you. It's our top story. Because this federal sex trafficking probe, which Gaetz himself confirms is going on, he doesn't deny that it's going on and that he's a subject and that he's talked to folks. It stems from an associate that was charged with sex trafficking and other crimes. Now, today, that Gaetz associate, former Florida tax collector Joel Greenberg, had a hearing to discuss a trial date. But the hearing turned out to be fast, 6 minutes actually in all, and we'll explain why, because under this spotlight, Greenberg is now expected, according to reporting, to plead guilty now to an array of federal charges, which could include sex trafficking and sex with a minor and identity theft.
Prosecutors and defense lawyers say that they expect a plea deal for Gaetz associate Joel Greenberg, a plea by the former elected official. Joel Greenberg could significantly strengthen the Justice Department's hand as it investigates Mr. Gaetz.
He's facing over 33 criminal counts, so he has an incentive here to provide any evidence of any sort of criminal conduct.
You can see there all the reporting, a big story all over the place with these indications. Hasn't happened yet that he would admit to some of these crimes. And that raises a legal question that you may recall from any big case that can involve big or high-profile people. It was a big issue in the Mueller probe. The question becomes, will this person flip? Will they become a cooperating witness? Do they have knowledge of crimes by other important people? Will this person work with the feds and the DOJ? Is there exposure here for Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz? And here is something that might haunt him. Here is Greenberg's attorney after court today.
Does Matt Gaetz have anything to worry about? I'm sure Matt Gaetz is not feeling very comfortable today.
Not feeling comfortable. There are people who see that as an ominous sign for Gaetz. But again, that's one lawyer representing one person putting out that message. We're not yet reporting anything that confirms some kind of cooperation deal. Now, if Greenberg does cooperate, if he does have evidence of interest to the feds, whether that's about Mr. Gaetz or other individuals, he could, like anyone else, get a more lenient sentence. He's looking at 12 years in prison. Now, all this comes as a new report is breaking. First from CBS News, and NBC News has confirmed this, that the feds are probing this separate international trip Gaetz took down to the Bahamas. They believe it was in late 2018 or early 2019. And it's relevant to the probe because it involves, quote, women paid to travel for sex, which could violate federal law, and whether Gaetz or Greenberg, who was in court today, used the internet to search for women they could pay for sex, according to sources that NBC News there has confirmed with. In addition, the reporting says, quote, Gaetz was on that trip with a marijuana entrepreneur who allegedly paid for the travel expenses, accommodations, and female experts, end quote, according to those sources. Again, Gaetz denied all of these allegations. Gaetz has not been charged with any crimes. And we want to report for you, because this is a live and ongoing issue, a Gaetz spokesperson speaking out new about this latest reporting and saying, quote, it looks like a general fishing exercise about vacations and consensual relationships with adults, end quote. Joining us now on this top story riveting Washington is Dave Aronberg, state attorney for Palm Beach County, Mark Caputo, national political reporter from Politico, and also a Florida politics guru. Many may remember him from a lot of our Florida political coverage. And Liz Plank, MSNBC columnist and author. Hello, everyone. Let me start with you, Mark, because this is quite a story, I would say. No shade, but even for Florida.
Oh yeah, it's a tale of not just one Florida man, but at least two Florida men, and maybe many Florida men. I think you summed up the case pretty well. The problem that we're having on the media side of this is we're getting a lot of anonymous leaks, and we're not getting a lot of details. And Gaetz is he's not hiding from this, and he's ratcheting up pressure. He's going to be speaking tomorrow at a pro-Trump group at Trump Doral, and it's going to be interesting to see if there really is kind of a tit-for-tat between Gaetz and the Fed, because there seems to be this ongoing dynamic where a leak comes out about him, and then he speaks out about it, and then another leak comes out. So the question is, what's he going to say tomorrow, and then what new revelations?
Most self-employed and 1099 contractors have no idea they can actually qualify for a 100% forgivable PPP loan. They can get 2.5 months of earnings from the SBA and have it completely forgiven. That is, if they apply before the funds run out. We've created a 60-second quiz that can tell you if you qualify and how much you can get. The forgivable loans have no fees or cost to apply, no credit checks or criminal background checks, and no personal guarantee or collateral required. As long as you are getting paid for this work before February 15th, 2020.
Dave, walk us through what happened in court today and what it means that there could be some sort of plea.
Good evening, Ari. Today was not surprising at all because Joel Greenberg is facing child sex trafficking charges involving the same 17-year-old girl at the heart of the Matt Gaetz investigation. And if you add all the charges together that Greenberg is facing, he faces up to life in prison. So he has every incentive to make a deal. So his lawyer pretty much confirmed that's what's going on. And the fact that Matt Gaetz is out there is a lifeline for Joel Greenberg. Joel Greenberg is just a local tax collector. Matt Gaetz is a congressman, and so he's clearly a bigger target. And Joel Greenberg knows where all the bodies are buried here. And if he's the first one in the prosecutor's door, he'll get the best deal.
Yep. Let me press you for a little bit of precision here because, in fairness, just following the facts, you said, quote, pretty much confirmed. But can we read into that yet? I mean, what Greenberg said could be read as confirmation. I understand what you're drawing on to say that. But could he not also turn around in a few days and say, well, I was referring to why Gaetz should be uncomfortable given all the allegations, but our clients go in a different direction?
All right, I cannot imagine that his lawyers are going to allow him to go to trial where he faces a 10-year mandatory minimum sentence for child sex trafficking. I mean, he's like a walking criminal enterprise, this guy. And the only thing he has going in his favor is that there's a bigger fish to flip on. And so I've always felt that it was inevitable that this day would come. I think his lawyer, though, when you say the other guy should be uncomfortable right now, that to me confirms that this whole deal is inevitable and imminent.
Yep. Yep. And we value your legal analysis here. I want to be clear with viewers. Confirms it for you. NBC News has not confirmed a cooperation deal yet. And as I mentioned the Mueller probe because it was just such a recent example where there's gradations to whether people are just trying to get a deal to plea, whether they cooperate, and then separately whether they have criminal evidence on others. We're not there yet, in fairness to Mr. Gaetz, who hasn't been charged yet, although, boy, are there a lot of allegations. Liz Plank, I turn to you not for the law, but for what appears to be another case of hypocrisy for a Republican Party that has it campaigned and talked a lot about all kinds of traditional values. What's going on here?
Yeah, speaking of feeling uncomfortable today, this is the kind of story that you need to take a swig of Pepto-Bismol to be able to stomach and read through. Some of the details today, the fact that they may have shared a girlfriend, and by girlfriend it's a 17-year-old child, is really, really worrying and pretty astounding. And it's, so, Matt Gaetz is what happens when masculinity doesn't get an upgrade. When, in a well-functioning patriarchy, women's bodies and girls' bodies become the biggest form of currency. And to me, the biggest sign of that is the fact that Matt Gaetz allegedly, all of this is true, and with Joel Greenberg, they didn't just do this, they talked about it. They boasted about these things, about these alleged crimes to other men, to many other men. Politico is reporting that there are 8 people who are, were familiar with the story that they were sharing this 17-year-old girl. So that's very, very concerning to me. And it's very, it shows sort of where the bar is for the Republican Party and that it is very, very low.
Have you ever wondered what would happen if you actually sat down and talked with missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Well, the answer depends.
There have been a slew of developments with Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz' pressure that he's facing in this federal probe, the sex trafficking. But one place where you wouldn't hear about it at all as a news viewer would actually be on Fox News. Gates has not been on the network since the widely panned interview he did with Tucker Carlson that Fox called so weird. And by one count, the Gates investigation has been mentioned on Fox just 7 times. Here's why that's particularly striking. Gates is well known to their audience. It's newsworthy to hear about developments of someone who's well known in the news. In fact, Gates even rose to prominence primarily because of those many, many appearances you see on the screen on Fox News. Since August 2017, he's appeared a whopping 313 times, and out of those, 121 were on Hannity. I mean, that means he's on there all the time. And Hannity went further. This is something that almost no one does in media, including even, in fairness, most people who work for Fox News. Hannity went out and actively electorally campaigned for Gates, which is not the kind of thing anchors or journalists do. This was at a 2018 rally in Florida where the two men praised each other profusely.
I got to thank Sean Hannity. Sean Hannity gives me a platform almost every night to get out there and tell it like it is. And I thank him for that.
It's this young Mickey Mantle over here. And it's your next governor over there. They are the ones fighting the hardest for the president. And I'm very thankful to both of you for what you do every day, which is why it's an honor to share the stage with both of you.
You almost can't tell who's benefiting who. And it was within a year or so that Hannity was privately giving Gates advice on managing a different crisis, one where he was actually facing an ethics investigation. And that probe focused on whether Gates was tweeting overly threatening messages at Trump fixer Michael Cohen, whether it constituted witness intimidation. But Hannity, who we just showed you, was so quick to discuss Gates, to campaign for him, to, as Gates put it, have him on his show almost every night. Well, Sean Hannity hasn't mentioned Gates once since all this became public, this investigation. Again, as mentioned, as for the underlying charges, Gates denies any wrongdoing. We're joined now by our friend Jason Johnson. Jason, it's quite a turnaround.
Yeah. Motherfucker, man.
Hello, Pegasus Lifestyle Management. How can I help? Great. The aircraft is waiting for you at our nearest airfield. We trust you'll be happy, sir.
Discovery Plus is here, and people are singing our praises. The rave reviews are rolling in.
Those two guys loading the boxes are with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. In the Trump investigation, they have subpoenaed and are receiving documents and a computer belonging to that woman in the blue mask, Jennifer Weisselberg. She's the daughter-in-law of Trump's chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg.
Have you specifically talked with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office?
Multiple times.
Okay.
And it's not over.
And that's because prosecutors are trying to flip Alan Weisselberg, and they're hoping to leverage the potential legal exposure of his son, Jennifer's ex-husband, there.
I am not a woman who is willing to live a life of secrecy out of fear any longer.
Mary and Jennifer Weisselberg live rent-free courtesy of the Trumps in this luxury New York apartment building. It could raise legal and tax issues. Mary Weisselberg also ran the cash-only Trump ice skating rinks in Central Park. Jennifer, who went to the 2016 inauguration with her then-husband and his parents, says her ex and his father are cut from the same cloth.
Alan Weisselberg is defined by what Donald thinks about him, about saving him money, regardless.
Prosecutors suspect Alan and Mary Weisselberg, with Trump's involvement, crossed the line into bank fraud and tax fraud. Hello, everybody. I'm David Schuster, and thanks for watching. The collection of financial records and documents from Jennifer was the pressure prosecutors are putting on Donald Trump's chief financial officer and his family. Will Alan Weisselberg and his son Barry stay loyal to Donald Trump? Jennifer Weisselberg isn't so sure, but there are signs that Trump himself fears the worst about the Manhattan grand jury investigation. Trump has now hired a New York criminal defense attorney. The Trump Organization confirms that Ronald Fischetti, who represents the former president and the organization, Fischetti has spent decades working as a criminal defense attorney in both state and federal court. He's also a former law partner of Mark Pomerantz, the former federal prosecutor leading the Manhattan Trump case. Witnesses have reportedly told Pomerantz that the Trump Organization overinflated property values to obtain bank loans and underinflated asset values to decrease taxes. Fischetti says prosecutor Pomerantz, who we worked with for 8 years, is straight as an arrow. We are both professionals, so there won't be any problems. Legal experts say it's a smart move by Trump to bring on a criminal defense attorney who already has a strong relationship with the key prosecutor. It means Trump probably won't get surprised or blindsided by big developments in this case, including potential indictments. This connection could also help Trump if he wanted to consider or discuss a potential deal. In the meantime, Trump and his family insist they've done nothing wrong. As for Trump's chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg, there is every indication he has not yet provided the kind of information or knowledge that prosecutors believe he has. So, the effort to turn up the heat on Weisselberg and his son continues. It's not unusual for prosecutors to squeeze family members of key investigation witnesses. In fact, this strategy happens every day in criminal investigations across the United States. The difference in this one, of course, is that this investigation is targeting Donald Trump, the former president. Jennifer Weisselberg says she is speaking out now because of what she describes as a repugnant effort by her ex-husband in their bitter child custody dispute.
We wish that I personally didn't have the attachment to somebody that has the same ethics as the Trump-Weisselberg family.
Those ethics of the Weisselbergs and Donald Trump are now under the microscope in the Manhattan DA's criminal investigation, and by all accounts, the investigation is intensifying.
This is your moment to get a healthcare plan at a price that fits your budget and the care you deserve. Get started now.
Uncovering business insights shouldn't be a leap of faith. Using the prescriptive data modeling techniques learned in the Business Analytics program online at Grand Canyon University, you can bring transformative insights to leadership. Data.
Get to the news. We're following new developments in the Justice Department investigation of Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz. NBC News has learned that Joel Greenberg, a former Florida tax official and associate of Gaetz, is expected to plead guilty in the criminal case that spawned the sex trafficking investigation into the congressman. The New York Times points out that this could be an indication that Greenberg is likely to cooperate as a key witness against Gaetz. Investigators are said to be examining their involvement with women who were recruited online for sex and given cash payments, as well as whether Congressman Gates had sex with a 17-year-old. Gates, who has not been charged with any crime, has repeatedly denied wrongdoing. An attorney who represents Joel Greenberg spoke to reporters after a status hearing yesterday. Listen to what he said when asked about Matt Gaetz.
Does Matt Gaetz have anything to worry about? Does Matt Gaetz? That is such a.
When it comes to what happened today in court,
does he have anything to worry about? I'm sure Matt Gaetz is not feeling very comfortable.
Yeah, you know, up until now, John Heilman, all we had were stories from the newspaper. We had a lot of information, but nothing from the principals here. The people actually knew what was going on. So we weren't even at an innocent until proven guilty stage. We were just hearing second and third hand from some great reporting, but had not heard from any of the principals of the case. Yesterday, really, well, first of all, you could tell because he was working with the state, there was going to be a plea deal. You knew where this was going. But then for the tax collector's attorney to come out and say that really does more than just strongly suggest that they're cooperating with the state. And as his attorney says, that Congressman has something to worry about.
Yeah, Joe. First of all, happy birthday. That's it's still a little befuddling. It's a little befuddling to me that you're at work at 6 a.m. on your birthday. But I guess the celebrations will start later today. And I do think it's a little bit like this. That the worst thing that you don't want to hear when you're ensnared in a potential sex trafficking case is your friend, the indicted for sex trafficking friend of yours, their attorney, this attorney coming out and saying that you have some things to be concerned about. I mean, I think it's maybe the worst possible thing you could hear in these circumstances. And it's as you're building a case like this. There are a lot, as you just said a second ago, we heard a lot of reporting. We haven't heard from any material witnesses, but we've skipped over material witnesses now and gone straight to the heart of the case. If there's anybody we know about right now who has the capacity to flip on Matt Gaetz in a devastating way, it is this guy who is the indicted sex trafficker. And so we're now in the room where it happened, so to speak, and getting the strongest emanations possible that in fact that there is something to talk about, and that the guy who has the thing to talk about is going to talk about it. And I can't imagine but that yesterday was maybe the worst day in Matt Gaetz's life. I would have thought there may be worse days ahead, but yesterday was probably pretty bad.
Let's bring in the New York Times reporter who's been on this story right from the beginning, Michael Schmidt, also an MSNBC national security analyst. Mike, good morning. So bring us up to speed here on Joel Greenberg and this plea deal. His attorney there making it pretty clear that Joel Greenberg may be flipping on his buddy Matt Gaetz here.
Yeah, and as you guys were pointing out, Fritz Scheller, the lawyer who made those statements, is a long-time Florida attorney. He represented the wife of the Pulse nightclub shooter who was indicted on terrorism charges and actually went to trial against the government to fight them and won. And
hello, you're through to Pegasus Lifestyle Management. How can I help?
The left or the right.
Your beautiful new aircraft is waiting at our nearest airfield. We hope you're very happy, sir.
To go out and say that and not know the message that he is sending. Clearly, that is a message directly to the public and to the government and to Matt Gaetz about the direction of where this is headed, about what his client is willing to do. Because you have to remember, Joel Greenberg is someone that we, certainly in the national media and the national, anyone following politics had no idea was up until about 10 days ago. But Joel Greenberg faces an enormous amount of time in prison for a range of charges, including sex trafficking, that he has been indicted on. And the only way that he can bring that number down is to provide cooperation to the government, to help their investigation, to help them lead to other prosecutions. And obviously Gates is the biggest fish that we know of, certainly, in this investigation. And often, whatever, these investigations can be very successful. They can get a lot of people to plead guilty. They can go to trial and win. But if in the end the government were to, let's say, charge Gates and lose that case, that is what the public will remember. So the government wants to have as many witnesses as possible as it moves forward here. And what this lawyer is trying to do is position his client to benefit the most from cooperating.
Well, and Michael, based on sources I spoke with yesterday in Florida, there may be more than one person testifying against the congressman. The Department of Justice has notified several people that they are of interest in this case. So is it possible you may have several parties that were involved in these events that the congressman and the tax collector went to, who are now, especially if they were responsible for transporting the 17-year-old, or being a part of that, and being there while the 17-year-old was being transported. There are several other people who are going to be wanting to get deals from the feds as well, right?
There are obviously lots of problems when you're investigated by the government. But one of them is that typically if you're a high-profile person, a range of conduct that you've done gets examined. The government gets in, they start looking at your phone records, they start looking at your email messages, they start talking to people around you. And in the process of that, if you've done things that are wrong, they start to pop up. So as we lay out in our story today, there are different trips that Gates may have taken that the government is looking at. Did he try and take women with him to the Bahamas? Who was on those trips? It doesn't look like Greenberg was on those trips, but who was with him? And who were the people affiliated with him? And him being a young congressman in Florida, there were there donors that wanted to go with him. As we also talked about in the story today, there's an allegation the government has learned about ghost candidates in 2020 elections in Florida. That has no, there's no nexus between that and the sex trafficking, but
We've been tracking this big story across Washington all week. Republican congressman and staunch Trump ally Matt Gaetz facing a DOJ probe, facing a new ethics committee investigation related to the probe. Now, Gaetz has denied all wrongdoing. But we should know this is actually the second time the young, relatively new congressman has faced an ethics review. Statistically, most members never face a single one. But it was relatively recently in the Trump era, in 2019, when an ethics probe focused in on Gaetz publicly appearing to hassle or threaten a witness, Michael Cohen, who used to work for Trump. Many viewed it as an attempt to intimidate this key witness before providing his valuable testimony to the Congress.
Congressman, does your tweet amount to witness tampering?
Absolutely not. It's witness testing.
Should people see your tweet as a threat?
Absolutely not. I'm not threatening anyone. Michael Cohen threatens people.
The House Ethics Committee looked into that very issue, and it did ultimately admonish Gaetz for failing to, quote, exercise reasonable judgment and restraint. We should note it did not find that Gaetz was guilty of actually conducting witness tampering or witness intimidation of that valuable witness at the time, according to House investigators, Michael Cohen. Joining us now is Michael Cohen. He hosts the podcast Mea Culpa. He's the author of the book Disloyal, and he was formerly a lawyer for Donald Trump. Thanks for coming back, Michael.
How you doing, Ari? Yeah, I gave myself a little rest and relaxation for a few weeks.
Hey, we can all use it these days. Good to have you back, sir. As I mentioned, you were considered a valuable witness in that proceeding, as well as in the Mueller probe, as well as up with the New York DA. We'll get to that because it's newsworthy. But let's start with Mr. Gaetz. You both have something in common. And